Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome back in lecture number 7. Today's concept is also very much interesting as the previous concepts. They are quite new and interesting as well. So there must be a lot of questions in the minds. So I welcome all the questions. Anytime if you want to ask any questions, it will be conveyed to me and we can share the knowledge. And today's topic is factors of production in Islam and factor markets in Islamic framework. Some part of this lecture we will cover in today's lecture and some part we will cover into the next lecture. Actually, this is based on a paper and it will be an example as well that when you are asked to present any paper, how you will present that paper. And the concept of factor markets or factors of production in Islamic economic system is described very well in this paper. So I selected this paper for this lecture. Let's have a look about our previous lecture. We studied the concept of money and how it evolved, and we watched an animated documentary as well. And there were so many interesting concepts that how the money was created in the beginning and how these paper notes, they became popular, and how the banking system evolved and how the system is exploiting the people. And in that documentary, you saw the concepts of credit creation, inflation, and unjust appropriation of wealth, and deposit multiplication. These concepts have been discussed in detail, and a lot of quotations were displayed there in that documentary from different scholars, from politicians, and they were all describing the ills of the system at the moment. So the system which has its inherent problems, there are problems by default. For example, as I told you earlier in previous lecture, that a deposit of 1 million, how it is multiplied many times. And if there is no regulation from the government that there must be some reserve ratio like 10%, 20%, 30%. So if there is no reserve ratio, then the deposit will grow infinitely. But if we put a limit that the reserve ratio would be 10% or 20%, we saw an example of reserve ratio with 10%. So with 10%, a deposit of 100,000 will grow 10 times and it will become a 1 million. So the banks, if they have to pay, for example, an interest rate of 8%, so on 1 million, if they pay 8%, and then they can earn 20% on it, or maybe any amount of interest. In developing countries, interest rates are very high, whereas in developed countries, interest rates are lower. But still, they can earn a huge amount of interest as a revenue. So there is a principal amount, plus there are interest incomes for the banks. So the principal amount is same in the economy, but when they receive it back from the loans, so they receive the principal plus interest. So that interest money has to be created. And then at the same time, when the deposits are multiplied, and then the potential of one customer having 100,000 rupees in the deposit is multiplied to 10 times, and that potential to purchase by the 10 people, it requires printing of more and more money. So the system in its own problem, with its own inherent problem, it creates more and more money. So debt creates money. So that is the concept. And debt, money as debt, we saw in the documentary. And in today's lecture, the learning outcomes are, after this lecture, you should be able to understand what are the factors of production in conventional system. And normally, as we know, the factors of production, they are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur, what we have studied in our conventional system. And then you will be able to understand the concept of factors of production in Islamic economic system and role of money as being a factor of production. So the main difference between the two systems, there are so many other differences, but one of the major differences, role of money, the monetary resources. In conventional economic system, monetary resources are considered to be part of capital. Whereas in Islam, monetary sources, they can become capital, but they are not in itself are capital. They are only piece of paper. But when they are converted into some consumable or in any other form of input for the production process, then they become capital. And there is major difference about the renting or investing of these monetary resources, and we'll see in the lecture how it goes. As I told you earlier, today's topic is the factors of production in Islamic economic framework. So before we go to the topic, let's understand what are the factors of production in the conventional economic system. So the factors of production, actually they are the inputs that provide a productive service in a production process. So in a production process, every input that is used for the process, we call it a factor of production. And then conventional economic theory suggests 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. So as you can see, land covers everything which we can get out of land, anything on the surface of the earth and anything under the surface of the earth. So, and the earth's surface itself as well, we can rent it out, and land provides us so many things from under the surface and over the surface. And anything we extract from the land will be a factor of production under the label of land. And then the labor. The individuals in the society, they perform the jobs of labor, and in return they earn their wages. And it is one of the main ingredient of the production process. All the raw materials, mostly they come from the land, and all the labor work, it comes from the individuals, from the people in the economy. And the capital under the conventional economic system, mostly it is the cash. And there are some physical capital, but under the conventional economic system, the major portion or the major item under the heading of capital is the cash or the monetary resources. And then the manager who manages all these resources is known as entrepreneur. But the exact definition of an entrepreneur is the person who manages all these resources in an innovative way, such that the person can become a successful business person. And an entrepreneur is always looking deficiencies, the shortcomings, and the differences, and what are the gaps available in the economy. And the entrepreneur is always trying to pinpoint those gaps and then to bridge those gaps. It's the job of an entrepreneur. They are always looking for opportunities, and whenever they find an opportunity, they manage these resources in an innovative way so that they can become successful. So these factors of production, they are owned by certain people and they earn their own reward. For example, land is owned by landlord, and sometimes land is collectively owned by the nation, by the people of the country. When it is not in the name of a particular person, then it's in the name of the state, within the borders of the state. And the reward for land is rent. If you rent out your piece of land, the reward you earn is the rent for that piece of land. And nature of the factor is that all natural resources, as I explained earlier, all the natural resources, they come out of land, and they are known as factor of production that come out of this particular factor of production. And the labor, the owner of the factor is the laborer, the person who performs this job, and the reward is wage. And this is a human factor. Because as it is clear, the labor is performed by the human, and that's why it's a human factor. And most of the countries in the developing world, they have human capital with them, and they export that human capital also, and they earn a lot of remittances against their export of human capital. Whereas the developed countries, they are the biggest importers of the human capital, because most of the high-tech industry they have in their countries, so they need labor, and they import labor from other countries. So the developing countries, they provide human capital to the developed nations as well. And the capital, the owner of capital is the money lender under the conventional thinking, and then the reward is interest. And these are the man-made factors, like the currency notes, and it may be capital also includes the machinery, plant, and anything which has been manufactured or prepared by the human factor. And then the enterprise. Enterprise is the business entity itself, and the owner of an enterprise is the entrepreneur if it is a small business, and if it is a big business, a corporation, the shareholders, they are the owners of the enterprise. And then the reward is profit. And on the other hand, the reward can be loss as well. And these are also man-made factors. So the job of entrepreneur is to manage all these resources. So in a conventional economic system, the cycle of factors of production in the society, it goes like that. The households, it starts from the household, and they have labor, land, capital, and entrepreneur. All these entrepreneurial abilities, they are the owners are the household. So the households, they sell the factors of production and they buy products of their work. So these factors of production, when they are put in a process, they produce something, and again the households themselves, they purchase it. And it goes like that. These factors of production go to the factor market. Households sell their factors of production in the factor market, and in reward they earn money, income, wages, rent, interest, and profit. Whatever is the reward of all these factors of production, it comes back to the household. And then these factors of production, they go to the businesses. Businesses, they buy these factors of production and they pay a cost for purchasing these factors of production, and that cost actually is the income of the household. So then the businesses, they use these factors of production and they prepare goods and services, and they supply these goods and services to the product market, and they sell their products in the market, and in reward they earn revenues, and based upon their revenues and cost they earn profit. And then these from the product market, which has been prepared by the businesses, the household, they purchase these goods and services, and against these goods and services they pay back the consumption expenditure to the product market. So this cycle goes on and on. So in a healthy economy, this process is very much smooth, and the factors of production, they get their proper reward. But there are some factors of exploitation which interrupt all this process, and we are going to discuss them also in different slides. And there is some confusion as well. For example, capital is recognized as money and physical capital under the conventional economic system. All the monetary resources and the physical resources like plant, machinery, equipment, car, anything, these are the capital, so physical capital as well. So the capital resources, they earn interest as we saw in our previous slides, but the thing is, the reward of capital, as we discussed, is interest rate, but for the monetary resources the reward is interest, whereas for the capital resources reward is rent. So this is a confusion, and the conventional economic theory does not describe it properly. So the logic suggests that physical assets should earn rent per machine or per capital asset. So in conventional economic theory, capital earns interest rate, reward of capital is interest rate, whereas the physical capital, they are earning rent or interest rent per machine or per hour, whatever is the situation as per agreement. So this is a confusion in the factors of production in conventional economic theory. Now let's discuss the factors of production in Islamic framework. Islamic economy, it divides the factors of production into two kinds, like factor inputs and consumed inputs. Factor inputs are those inputs which are not consumed and they earn a reward on it. They might be earning salary, they might be earning wages, what we call them ujrat as well, and it also earns rent. And all those factors of production which are consumed in the process, they are not supposed to earn any rent or wages or ujrat on it. They are supposed to be consumed in the process, and they can't become a factor input, rather they are the consumed inputs. For example, the fuel, the raw material, the plastics, which are consumed and which change their shape. And money, which is the main difference between the conventional economic system and Islamic economic system, that under conventional factors of production, money is part of capital and it is taken as a factor input. But in case of Islamic economic system, money or all the monetary resources, they are not taken as a factor input. So money is recognized as consumed input and becomes useful only when converted into consumed input of factor or factor input. So money, we can convert it into a consumed input or factor input. So it is consumed. By nature, money is consumed in this process, and it becomes input only when it takes the shape of a consumed input or a factor input. And money itself is not considered a factor of production, but it has the potential to become a factor of production. So this is, as we discussed in one of our previous lecture, money in itself is not a factor of production, but it becomes capital only when it is converted into some form of capital. And then the reward for the factors of production. What is reward for the factors of production? In Islam, as we discussed, that there are factor inputs and there are consumed inputs. And what are their rewards? There are two types of rewards. As the nature of the inputs, they suggest them to become a hired factor of production or an entrepreneurial factor of production. So the consumed inputs, they can't become an entrepreneurial factor of production, whereas the factor inputs, they can become a hired factor of production, and also we can become an entrepreneurial factor of production. So what is hired factor of production? All those factors that earn ujrat, wage or rent. For example, labor earns wage, land earns rent, machinery earns rent. So these are the factor inputs. Whereas entrepreneurial factors of production are the factors that can face the risk. When any business venture is initiated, the factors who are facing risk, for example, the entrepreneur, the machinery, any physical capital which is facing the risk of getting some profits or suffering some losses. So those factors, they can become an entrepreneurial factor of production, and the reward for entrepreneurial factors of production is the profit. So the factors like entrepreneur, capital assets, which are employed in the production process with the intention to earn some profit, those are the factors which earn profit as a reward. Otherwise, if you rent out your machinery, you are not supposed to face any kind of risk. You will simply earning a reward as a rent. But when you employ your asset, your machinery in your business, and you are not going to earn any rent on it, rather you are going to earn some profits on it. So this is the difference between hired factor of production and entrepreneurial factor of production. And only factor inputs which are not consumed in the process, they can become either hired factor of production or an entrepreneurial factor of production. And discussing the reward for the factors of production, for factor inputs, those factor inputs that opt to become a hired factor of production, the reward is ujrat or rent. Money, not being a factor input, cannot earn any ujrat or rent. So that's the difference here. The monetary resources under conventional economic system, they earn rent on it, they earn interest on it, as we know them as cost of capital. But under Islamic economic system, monetary resources, they are consumed inputs, so they can't become and they can't be paid any profit or any rent on it. And as said earlier, all those factors of production who are exposed to face a risk while starting any new business and business activity, their reward is profit. Then what are the entrepreneurial factors of production? Let's have a look into the details. Entrepreneurial factors of production are the combination of human and non-human resources that are willing to bear risk involved in initiating or participating in productive economic venture. They can be the human, they can be any physical capital, and the entrepreneurial factors are economic resources which confront with a choice to work for a wage or to have their own work, and decide those factors which decides in favor of their own work, they can become the entrepreneurial factors of production. And sometimes economic resources have no choice but to become an entrepreneurial factor of production. For example, the person, the human capital, who can become a labor, and the same human capital can become an entrepreneur. So the entrepreneurship is the feature that requires certain skills. So every human cannot become an entrepreneur, because entrepreneur has to be smart, has to pinpoint the opportunities and then use the resources to grab that opportunity to and earn profits. But if the person doesn't have that much qualities, then he is only left with one option: to become a salaried person or to become a laborer. So, and sometimes the market risk is so high that people, they don't want to put their resources on risk, and they opt to become a hired factor of production, that is a laborer. And sometimes people, they have monetary resources with them. Since they cannot earn interest under the Islamic economic system, so they have to convert their monetary resources into some entrepreneurial resources. And on the other hand, sometimes the wage rate in the market is so low that people prefer not to become a laborer. So the option is only to become an entrepreneurial factor of production. So there are certain conditions where the human capital, they have to become, or the physical capital, they have to become an entrepreneurial factor, because the situation in the market is such that they can't go as a hired factor of production. For factor inputs, those who opt to become an entrepreneurial factor of production, there are two types of decisions. For example, the decision making and risk taking. So the decision making is solely the job of an entrepreneur, the human capital, the human factor of production. So then all other physical capitals, they can face the risk, but they can't decide what to do. So the job of an entrepreneur is to become a decision maker and to bear the risk as well. And sometimes the entrepreneur, they can visualize an opportunity, but they can't become a good manager, they can't become a good clerk to input all the entries of the daily operations. So they hire the services of other people. They hire the managers, the clerks, and also the security staffs, and different types of staffs they can hire. They can use the services of those people. So the organizers, they earn. The organizers means the managers, the clerks, the security staff, and all other types of staffs. They earn their ujrat, their salary, whereas the entrepreneur who is managing that whole organization, who started or initiated that business activity, they would earn profit as a reward of their efforts. And in case of hired factor of production, all the resources that offer productive services for a definite reward, they are known as hired factor of production. So the reward must be known. For example, if you have a vehicle, if you have a car, for example, and you want to rent it out, so it must be clear, it must be mentioned clearly in the contract, or it must be clear to the people whom you are going to give your car for use, that reward or rent would be hourly basis or 24-hour times, and whatever is the situation. So as we discussed, all factor inputs, they can become an entrepreneurial factor of production, and they can become a hired factor of production as well. Whereas all the consumed inputs, they can't become a hired factor of production, because they are consumed in the process. And the organizations and managers as factors of production too are treated as hired factor of production, as long as they are not willing to bear the entrepreneurial risk. So all those human capital, as well as discussed in the previous slide, for example, managers, clerks, the security staff, or any other staff, they are the hired factors of production, and when they want to become an entrepreneurial factor of production, they have to face the risk as well. So the reward for facing risk is the profit, and that is the job of entrepreneurial factors of production. And the hired factors of production are employed by the entrepreneurial factors of production. So if the factors of production, they opt to become an entrepreneurial factors of production, so there will be more job opportunities in the economy. And if the factors of production, they opt to become hired factors of production, there will be higher risk in the market. It means the factors of production, they opt not to take risk, rather they opt to become a hired factor of production. So there are less job opportunities, and the economies which promote entrepreneurial factors of production, there the unemployment rate is reduced and the job opportunities are increased and created more and more. So while discussing hired factors of production, what they can be? Hired factors of production, they include land, labor, physical capital goods, and human capital. So almost all of the factor inputs, they can become a hired factor of production. And hired factors of production are derived from the same resources which can offer themselves as entrepreneurial factors of production. So this point is coming repeatedly, that all those factor inputs, those who opt to become an entrepreneurial factor of production, they come also out of the factor inputs, and those who want to become a hired factor of production, they also become out of the factor inputs. And the supply and demand for hired factors of production thus competes with the supply and demand of entrepreneurial factors of production. Since the entrepreneurial factors and hired factors, they both have to come out of the factor inputs, so there is a competition between the hired factors of production and entrepreneurial factors of production. If the majority of the factors, they go up to become entrepreneurial factors of production, it means hired factors of production will be lesser in the market. So it means there will be more job, there will be more demand for the people, and the wage rates will be higher and the rent will be higher. So but if the hired factors of production are in abundant and entrepreneurial factors of production, they are lesser in the economy, it means there will be low wage rates and there will be low rent rates, and there will be less jobs available in the economy. And all these resources have to make a choice whether to opt in favor of becoming an hired factor of production or an entrepreneurial factor of production. So the institutional framework in Islamic economic system. So we are not going to discuss all aspects, but particular aspects which are dealing with the factors of production. For example, the commodity market, the factor markets for hired factors of production, and institution of participation, and institution of social insurance. So these are the institutional framework in Islamic economic system which handle the factors of production in Islamic economy. First of all, the commodity markets. Islam rates trading activities very high, and the institution of commodity market is one of the most important institutions in Islam. At many times in Quran, Allah says that instead of receiving interest or involving yourself in interest, do trade. And also, instead of targeting others' property illegally, do trade. So Islam always encourages trade and rates the trading activities very high. And also in one of hadith, it has been said, which means something like that 90% of the share of income is in the trading activities, in the business, and only 10% of the share is in the other activities, in the service sector. And Islamic laws regulate the commodity market operations and ensure the free market system with restrictions on the bad practices and misallocation of the resources. Islam, like capitalism, doesn't put any restrictions on the free market, but there are some moral values. For example, monopoly is not allowed. Prophet ﷺ said that whoever monopolizes is a sinful. So this act is never encouraged under Islamic economic system. And also misallocation of the resources. So as at the cost of the necessities of life of a segment of the society, if one segment of the society, because they are wealthy, they grab all those inputs or all those opportunities, so nothing is left for that particular society. The segment of the society, if deprived out of the necessities of life, then it is not allowed in Islam. So there must be some balance in the economy, in the market. And then the second framework is the factor markets for hired factors of production. Only those goods or resources can be rented or hired which are not consumed while they are used. So this is one of the principles, that only those factors of production can be hired which are not consumed in the process. So renting or hire is the sale or purchase of benefits or services of physical assets or resources, including human resources. So when a person is providing some services, actually the person is selling his or her services. So as a reward, the person is getting some ujrat or a wage. And the same way, if the physical capital like a machinery or a car, a truck, any plant is hired, it is providing some productive service, and that's why it is earning some income against that productive service. And then the assets or resources that generate benefits is in the form of real goods, like trees giving fruits or animals giving milk, cannot be rented for such benefits. So another restriction or distinction is that all those resources which produce instead of services, they generate benefits in the real form. For example, the trees which are giving fruits, the animal giving milk, these things cannot be rented out. And financial resources cannot be rented because they cannot generate any service without being consumed. So the financial resources or the monetary resources, they cannot be rented out because you have to consume them, and you have to convert them either into some factor inputs or into some consumed inputs. So the monetary resources, naturally they don't qualify for the factor inputs or consumed inputs, so they have to be converted into some form of factor of production, so that they also cannot be rented out. So this eliminates the institution of earning interest against your deposits. And then there is a controversial concept about the renting of land. So there are some opinions about renting of land for agriculture purpose. There are conflicting opinions. A minority of Islamic scholars, not the majority, only few of the scholars, they think that renting of land for agriculture purpose is not allowed, whereas the majority of Islamic scholars, they allow the renting of land for agriculture purposes within the general principle of renting, that is, any physical resource that is capable of providing or generating any service can be rented or hired. So because of its quality of the land to provide the service to grow something, it can be rented out. So the land is supposed to be just like a machinery which provides the service of being productive when the inputs are used. So again, in case of land, agricultural land, there are certain inputs into it, like seed. There must be some activities to fertilize the land, and fertilizers will be used, some other inputs, watering, everything that will be used. Only then it will give the service of producing something. So it qualifies for renting out. And under the same heading of factor markets for hired factors of production, rented goods should generate permitted economic benefits which are known and certain, otherwise the goods cannot be rented out. So the purpose of renting out should be specifically mentioned in the contract. When you rent out your plant or machinery or car or any goods, so the purpose must be known. If that goods or the plant or machinery are used for any other purpose, then it is not allowed. And those goods which are prohibited to rent or generate prohibited services cannot be rented as well. And any goods which can be used to produce something illegal, something immoral, which is not good for the society, for the individuals, those goods cannot be rented as well. And any loss or damage to the property not willfully caused by the tenant is to be borne by the owner. And one of the principle is that just like you hire a car and you use it, while you are using it properly, somebody came and hit the car, so the damage is not your responsibility. The company who provided you the car will, because they have the insurance for the car, so all the problems or the expenses will be borne by that company. So in Islamic economic system, if the tenant, the person who hired that asset, did not make any mistake, and because of any natural reason or because of some else's mistake, there is a damage to the asset, then the loss will go to the owner, not the tenant. And now discussing the ujrat for the hired factors of production. Ujrat will be determined by the supply and demand forces. If the factors of production in the economy, they opt to go for entrepreneurial factors of production, then there will be lesser factors of production available for as a hired factors of production. So because the demand will be more, so the ujrat or reward will be higher. So the demand and supply forces, they will determine what will be the level of ujrat for a particular asset. And ujrat by definition is fixed and known in advance, and ujrat should be definite and known in advance. So whenever you are going to hire a person, or whenever you are going to hire any asset, the ujrat, the reward or the rent must be known in advance in absolute terms. And if the ujrat is uncertain, and when you don't know the ujrat, it means there is a risk. So whenever risk is involved, then it is not a hired factor of production, it becomes an entrepreneurial factor of production. So when the ujrat is known, it is a hired factor of production, and when the ujrat is not known, it is an entrepreneurial factor of production. And ujrat cannot be in terms of same or similar benefits or services. For example, ujrat of machine cannot be in terms of allowing the use of a similar machine. For example, if you rent out your asset today, you cannot get the reward by using the asset of the other person of the same specification for the same period. The ujrat should be in some other terms. It is, however, allowed to pay ujrat of a machine by allowing the use of a building, or by allowing the use of an equipment or a machinery of different kind. So if you rent out your machinery, you can earn ujrat by using any other asset, like using a building or any other machinery of different nature. So the ujrat of a machine will not be the reward of using the same machine as a reward from the other person. And the resources that have been allowed to be rented or hired, they include, under Islamic economic system, as under the conventional system, land, which includes the services of cultivation or construction or plantation. So if you hire the land, you can use it for cultivation, agricultural purposes, and for the construction on it. And the second point is animals. Animals can also be rented, and the service they would provide will be like transportation or help in the cultivation process. And human resources, they can also be hired, and this will include the manual labor such as loader, unskilled worker, servants, etc., as well as such skills and professions are as doctors, lawyers, professors, organizers, managers. They will also include in the hired factors of production, and they can also be hired. And the buildings such as the houses, shops, factories, stores, and the warehouses, and also all such other goods that are capable of rendering services without being consumed. Without being consumed, this is the key line. You have to keep in mind that all the resources which are not consumed in the production process, they can be rented out. For example, machinery, tools, dresses, tents, jewelry, etc. And factor markets for hired factors of production are almost similar to the conventional factor markets for land, labor, and capital. However, there are certain differences. So the factor markets, they are almost same as we see for the conventional economic system, but there are certain differences as we mentioned earlier as well. For example, monetary resources cannot become a hired factor of production, which is not so in conventional framework. In conventional economic system, monetary resources can also be hired out. So you can see a whole institution is negated here, the renting of monetary resources, and the reward is definitely interest. So in Islamic economic system, you cannot rent out your monetary resources, you cannot earn interest on your loans. The only loans which are allowed in Islamic economic system, they are Qarz-e Hasana. Otherwise, you have to invest your resources. All the monetary resources, they need to be converted into some entrepreneurial factor of production or a hired factor of production. And before conversion into some other factors, monetary resources cannot become a hired factor of production. And the supply of hired factors of production, factors they particularly of labor, results in the process of choice whether to be a hired factor or an entrepreneurial factor, whereas in the conventional theory, their supply results in the process of a choice whether to get employed or not to get employed. So the treatment is totally different. In case of labor, for example, under Islamic economic system, the same human capital, they can become labor and they can become an entrepreneur. Whereas under the conventional economic system, the laborers, they have the choice whether to be employed or not. A different class of the society, they have the right to become an entrepreneur. Although the people in the poor segments of the society, which are the majority, they can become entrepreneur, but the opportunities are limited. For example, the people with more resources, they have easy access to the capital, they have easy access to the monetary resources, they can get loans from the banks, they can get contacts from other business people. But a person without much resources, who is a poor person, they are quite limited in their resources. They can't get loans from the bank because they don't have some securities with them, they don't have enough assets to pledge against those loans, and they are not trusted by other business people as well. So the richer, they get the richest, and the poor, they get poorer and poorer. And in Islam, entrepreneurial resources are encouraged to participate and bear the risk to earn profits. Participation will be on profit and loss sharing basis, for example, musharaka and mudarba. In Islamic framework, it encourages the entrepreneurial activities, and it encourages everybody who has any potential. It provides opportunities to all the individuals. In the society, every individual has the potential to become an entrepreneur, to become a laborer, or to opt for any of the factors of production. So the venues which are available for the participation, they are musharaka, it's a partnership, regular partnership, and mudarba. Mudarba is also kind of partnership. We will be studying them in our coming lectures, but I will tell you briefly. Musharaka is a partnership where two or more than two people, they get together and they join their resources, they bring their capital with them, maybe the monetary resources, the physical capital, and they employ their capital in a business, and they share the profits in a ratio, and also the losses according to the proportion of their investment. Whereas in case of mudarba, it's being a pure entrepreneurial firm where a person with some innovative idea, with some feasibility plan of a business, reaches to the person who has some capital with him or her, or any financial institution, they can provide capital to those people. So the capital comes 100% from one party, and the entrepreneurial services, they come from the other party. So they can both join together and they can start a partnership, and they can share the profits in a ratio, in an agreed ratio, and again the loss will be shared according to the proportion of investment. It means if the capital is provided 100% by one person, then the loss will be shared by the same person. And this might seem something strange to you, but we will be discussing the logic in our coming lectures. And the profit and loss sharing mechanism in the participation has been clearly defined in Islamic economic system. The profits can be shared at any agreed ratio, whereas the losses will be shared depending upon the level of investment. For example, A and B, they join together, and A brings 50% of the capital and B brings 40% of the capital, and suppose C is also one of the partners and C brings 10% of the total capital. Their profit sharing ratio can be like 30%, 30% and 40%. It seems little strange, but the fact is, depending upon the involvement of the individuals, of the partners in the business activity, will determine the share of the profit of these individuals. For example, in this example, C has lesser share in the total capital, but maybe C is providing more of the business activities, more of the services, whereas B has 40% of the capital and earns 30%. It means B might also be having some more business activities, and A, it seems more like a sleeping partner. So the share of a sleeping partner will be lesser, whereas the active partners, they will be getting higher shares, despite the fact that the active partners, they have the least share in the total capital. So, but when it comes to the sharing the loss, so what will happen? Profits will be shared according to the agreed ratio, but losses will be shared according to the proportion of the capital. So you see here, the profit is according to the agreement. It doesn't depend upon the proportion of capital, whereas loss depends all upon the proportion of capital. C will be having 10% of the loss, B will be having 40% of the loss, A will be having 50% of the loss, whereas A has only 30% of the share in the profit, but in case of loss, A will be having 50% of the loss. So this is the profit and loss sharing mechanism in Islamic economic system. The logics we will be discussing in the coming lectures. And discussing the same institution of participation, in a capitalist system, all productive resources are rentable. In an economy with high business risk, all productive resources will prefer to be on ujrat rather than to be entrepreneurial resources. And scarce factors obviously will have high ujrat, so there will be no compelling reason to face risk and to become an entrepreneurial factor of production. So in a capitalistic system, when the productive resources, they can be rented out and the risk in the market is higher, so the factors, they will not prefer to become an entrepreneurial factor, rather they will become a hired factor of production. And at the same time, when the ujrat or the rent is very high, then there is no compelling reason for the factors to become an entrepreneurial factor. They can earn very high reward or high ujrat from the economy, so the entrepreneurial factors will be limited in the economy. So when the entrepreneurial activities are limited in the economy, there will be lesser jobs for the unemployed people in the economy. And in the labor abundant developing countries, wage rates are so low that people prefer to sit idle. And when it comes to compare the benefits, they think rather than working, it's better to stay idle. And the surplus labor fails to get participation from the physical and financial capital because of high risk. Since the risk is very high and the labor, they don't opt to become an entrepreneurial factor, and at the same time, because of the abundance of the labor in the market, wage rates are very low, and a portion of the laborers, they opt to become an idle person rather than getting involved into any business activity or to earn any wage on it. and the surplus labor, they opt to stay idle rather than involving themselves in any hired factor of production or involving into a entrepreneurial factor of production. Whereas Islamic economic system, it encourages participation and it encourages the factors of production to become an entrepreneurial factor of production because of different obligatory reasons. For example, the monetary resources are prohibited to earn rent. So monetary resources, they can't become deposits and they cannot earn interest against those deposits. So monetary resources has to be invested. So monetary resources must be converted into some other factor of production like factor input and or a consumed factor input. So the consumed inputs, they will be used in the business, and factor inputs, they will also be used in the business. So they have the opportunities to become entrepreneurial factors of production or a hired factor of production. So monetary resources will not stay idle, they will be used into some business activity. And on the other hand, the obligatory taxes like zakat, it will also make sure the monetary resources will not stay idle. If the monetary resources, they are in the deposits or in the accounts or in the lockers, every year it will be diminished by 2.5%. So instead of eliminating it or diminishing it, the owners of the monetary resources will prefer to earn at least 2.5% and they will use them into some productive activity. So Islam encourages the institution of participation. So when the people, they will bring their monetary resources into the economy, definitely they will join hands with different other resources and it will encourage the participation of different factors of production, and the institutions of musharaka, mudarba, they will also emerge in the society and in the economy such that there are more and more jobs available for the laborers and the economy would improve and there will be real value addition into the economy. So while comparing it with the capitalistic system, the monetary resources, they earn interest. Their reward is interest while they are put in some deposits. So when the interest rates are higher, these resources will sit in the deposits, they will earn only interest rate. Whereas in capitalistic systems, the monetary resources are available on interest, as I told earlier. So, but these availability of the resources, when even it goes to the deposits of the banks, the availability of these resources to the entrepreneurs is subject to the credibility. So the credibility rating is obvious. The people who are wealthy, their rating is better than the people who are poor. And if the people who don't have any asset to pledge against the loans, against the availability of these monetary resources, so naturally, so the flow of these monetary resources naturally will be towards the people who have wealth or the businesses who have credibility with them. So the poor people, they will not have access to the monetary resources, and ultimately the poor become poorer and the richer become the richest, and the organizations, they will grow in their sizes because they have easy access to the capital resources and the return of their efforts is sure. So if they want to face any risk, the banks, they know that the return of these organizations is much more than the returns they have to pay to the banks. So the credibility will determine the flow of the monetary resources. And while discussing the same institution of participation, in Islam, the institution of participation creates demand for entrepreneurial resources. There are different reasons. For example, by creating new entrepreneurs to come into the market to avail entrepreneurial opportunities. So because the monetary resources cannot be rented out and they have to be put into some business activities, so it will encourage more and more entrepreneurial activities. And the participation will create demand for entrepreneurial resources by promoting participation of scarce resources with abundant resources, hence causing abundant entrepreneurial resources to come into the market as entrepreneurial factor of production. So there are some scarce resources into the market and there are some abundant resources into the market. So Islamic institution of participation encourages the combination of both, because monetary resources are abundant with one segment of the society, and the people who have innovative skills and entrepreneurial resources with them, they can join hands together and they can create more and more entrepreneurial activities. And by promoting participation of big entrepreneurs with small entrepreneurs, and hence creating demand for small entrepreneurs. So the bigger corporations, the bigger organizations, when they have their deposits, the abundant capital with them, so instead of putting that capital into the banks, because it is not allowed in Islam to earn any interest or any rent against the monetary resources, so the bigger businesses, they will involve the smaller businesses or the entrepreneurs from the economy, and it will encourage more and more entrepreneurial activity. And also by reducing risk in the economy, by distributing risk fairly among the entrepreneurs, and hence making the potential entrepreneurs to come forward and to take entrepreneurial activities. So when the bigger corporations and the system provides more and more resources into the economy, and the people who have the potential to become successful entrepreneurs, who have some innovative skills with them, they will be encouraged and the risk will be minimized. So when the risk is minimized, then the people will be taking more and more business ventures and more jobs and more value into the economy. And at the fourth point, the institution of social insurance. Islam ensures the well-being and livelihood of the people. The institution of social insurance consists of the following factors. Social insurance means the people, the deprived segment of the society, they are provided with the livelihoods which are the minimum requirement of the individuals. So in Islam, as we discuss almost in every lecture, that Allah says in Quran that in their wealth the beggar and the outcast had due share. The ayat I already quote here many times, وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقُّ الِّسَائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. And it makes sure the people who don't have any livelihood requirements with them, necessities of life, so the people who have wealth, they have to provide them. And also the institution of zakat, sadaqat and charity, it also makes sure the people, they have enough livelihood with them so that they can live a respectable life. And the system ensures minimum living needs for everyone, so the entrepreneurial factors would be encouraged to take risk, and the demand for entrepreneurial factors of production would increase, which means welfare of the people. So when the people, they know that even if they lose everything in any business, so the system will take care of them. There are people, there are institutions who will take care of them, and they will provide them with minimum necessities of life, so they can face any kind of risk with high morale. So when there are more entrepreneurial activities, there is more demand for entrepreneurial factors of production into the economy. It means welfare of the society and welfare in the economy. So this was our today's lecture, and in this lecture we discussed the concepts of factors of production under conventional economic system, and also we compared it and we discussed the factors of production under Islamic economic system. And the nature of factors of production, it differs from the nature under the conventional economic system, because we divide the factors of production in the factor inputs and consumed inputs. And the difference comes with a lot of differences are there, but the major difference regarding the monetary resources is that under Islamic economic system, monetary resources cannot be rented out. They have to be converted into factor input or consumed input. So if they are converted into factor inputs, they can become a hired factor of production, they can earn rent, and they can face risk, and they can become entrepreneurial factor of production. Whereas consumed inputs, they cannot become a hired factor of production, since monetary resources, they are the consumed inputs and they cannot be rented out. So these are the few differences, and also we discussed the framework under Islamic economic system with different institutions like institution of participation, institution of factor markets, and institution of social insurance, etc. And that's all about today's lecture. Inshallah, see you in next lecture. Till then, Assalamu alaikum.